Everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. My name is Heather Ledoux. I'm the chair of the TechWomen Power Breakfast. And in my day job, I'm the executive director of professional programs and partnerships at Franklin Pierce University. And thank you for joining us for our next edition of our virtual TechWomen Power Breakfast. I'm so happy you can join us this morning, and hopefully you have your coffee and maybe you have your breakfast with you now as well. That's great. Give me just one moment while I share my screen to open my slides. As you all know, it's a little clunkier having to do this, but this is where we are. 1 second here, please. Just takes 1 second to open it up. And we're going to go here and here. Okay. So, again, thank you and welcome. As you know, we normally meet every month, the second Wednesday of every month at the Manchester Country Club. And since the pandemic, we've been doing all our events virtually on this wonderful platform that the New Hampshire Tech Alliance discovered for us, Remo. And these breakfasts are not possible without our sponsors. So if you or your organization are interested in sponsoring any of our breakfasts, please reach out to one of my wonderful committee members, Shannon, Vadana, Dina, and Katie, or myself, and we'd be happy to discuss that with you. The benefits of sponsoring our breakfast are you have the opportunity to speak at the event, do a sponsor spotlight, your name's included in all our press releases prior to the event, and it really highlights your company's commitment to support women and girls in technology. And then a couple other housekeeping items before we dig into today's presentation. When you first logged in today, as you saw, we were in what we call a networking mode. Now I'm on stage. And once we prevent when we're in presentation mode, your cameras are off, so don't worry about that. Nobody can see you. They can only see me, even though I cannot see you. I'm talking into oblivion right now. That's one of the interesting things about the platform. But then when the speaker, when she presents, when she's all done, we'll be wrapped up by 9 o'clock. We're going to leave a few minutes for Q&A prior to 9 o'clock. And then we will leave the platform open until 9:30. So if you do want to stick around and hop around to tables and do some networking from 9 to 9:30, please feel free to do so. The sponsors will be at their table, and the speaker will be sticking around at table 1. So feel free to do so, do that. This month, I want to really thank our speaker this month, Market Street Talent. And Megan Feely is here, and she is going to be telling you all about Market Street Talent. So just give me 1 second to stop sharing, Megan, and we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome, it worked. Thank you, Heather. Happy Wednesday, everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Megan Feely, and I'm an account executive at Market Street Talent. This is actually my first Power Breakfast, so very interesting to see it kind of in a virtual realm. So Market Street Talent, we are super passionate about encouraging and promoting women and girls in technology. We actually had our own Women in Technology event last week, and I was also on the committee for the TechWomen, TechGirls annual luncheon a couple weeks ago. So we love being a part of these events. We are an IT recruiting company with a simple vision. We really want to promote and foster the growth of IT in our world. We value our candidates as much as our clients, and we really want to kind of create genuine partnerships throughout the placement process. So we value that long-term relationship with our customers over the quick buck, so to speak. And we really believe in pursuing excellence while also highlighting empathy and respect. So it's done really well for us in the past. Treat others the way you want to be treated. The golden rule has really kind of been our standard, as cliche as it sounds. We've been remote since March, so we are normally based in Portsmouth, but 2020 has been bonkers. And it's really kind of caused us to shift a little bit and get creative so that we can best serve our candidates and our clients. So We've been working a lot with the New Hampshire Tech Alliance to work on virtual events, especially eBrew. So that's been brought to life virtually. We also had a virtual job fair in August. We've instigated a past placement outreach project where we've basically just tried to get in touch with all of the placements that we've made recently to see how they're doing, see how they're handling the pandemic, make sure they're staying safe and sane. And we've also started a Market Street V-Connect, which is basically one-on-one virtual sessions with our recruiters for job seekers. So there's an opportunity to get a little more guidance, a little more support. Unfortunately, a lot of people's situations did change this year. So we've been trying to help in any way that we can. So super excited to be a part of this. I will be at the Market Street Talent table after the presentation. So if you'd like to drop by, say hello. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire IT, or you just want to say hi, this was a great excuse to put on a lip this morning. So happy to chat. And thanks for having me. Heather, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, I hit it and I hit it twice. So thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. As Megan mentioned, Market Street Talent does have a table. When we were in table mode, there were table numbers, and Market Street Talent was on table number 2, and it says Market Street Talent. And a couple other quick housekeeping items. When you'll see me in the image, and when the presenter is presenting, if you are new to this platform, you'll see in the top right-hand corner 4 little white arrows. If you click on that, that'll expand your screen so you're not seeing a little the little app. You can see it in full screen mode if you'd like to do that. So just wanted to give you that housekeeping item. And with that said, I want to welcome Dr. Jennifer Parent Nichols. She has her doctorate of physical therapy and doctorate in education. She is a physical therapist and certified as a pediatric clinical specialist by the American Board of Physical Therapy Specialties, where she also serves as a board member. She has earned certification as a brain injury specialist and provides education series, the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire. She has worked extensively in the areas of pediatrics with experience in early intervention, school-based and outpatient therapy, and adolescent sports medicine. Dr. Parent Nichols has taught in higher education since 2012. She's a clinical associate professor of physical therapy program and faculty at both Franklin Pierce University and Tufts University. Her areas of research include neurology, pediatrics, and education. And with that, welcome so much, Dr. Parent Nichols.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm going to actually try to start sharing my screen. We'll see how this goes as well. Good. I very much appreciate being at anything that has the words women and power and breakfast in it. So thank you so much for having me. I wanted to talk a little bit today about one of my passions, and that is the brain. And really what we're finding in terms of the impact of mindfulness. So I am going to ask everyone to do something a little techie so that we have the ability to do some sharing. I will also tell you that I will do my best to monitor the chat box. So if you have questions or comments, I'll do my best to kind of watch what's happening in there. And we certainly can take some time at the end to review. So I'm going to ask that on something, whether it's your computer or your cell phone, that you go to pollev.com and enter Jen Parent NI 672. There will be several times during the presentation that I'm going to ask your opinion on something, and I'd love to hear what it is that you have to say. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. Sure. Can you see it? I see Heather saying, please say it again. The site is pollev.com. And what you need to enter is JENN PARENTNI 672. I'm hoping you can see that on my screen. If you can't, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and move to, great, perfect. Thank you, Diana. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next screen. So today what I want to do is make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about really what is the impact, the neurological impact of both stress and mindful practice and the mitigating effects of mindful practice on stress. And then also talk about how we can really use mindful practice to fill both our personal and professional buckets. So let's get to it. Oh, everybody's already started. So here we go. Over the past 6 months, how would you describe your stress? A, less than usual. B, the same as it's always been. C, more than usual. Or D, there are not words to describe the amount of stress I feel. So give you a couple of seconds to go ahead and answer that. I want to be part of the less than usual crowd. I'm guessing that might have something to do with not having to commute to work. And I appreciate that, but I'm really seeing that most of us are saying that it's more than usual. Some of us are saying it's the same as it's always been. And I think that those two things are important. When we look at statistical analysis, when we say the same as it's ever been, depends on what your baseline was. So perhaps people were experiencing, high levels or low levels of stress before the pandemic was. The other day, someone said to me, the last 6 months have been really difficult. And I thought, it's only been 6 months. It feels like forever. So yes, it's been 6 months. And I think most of us are experiencing what 55% of you are all saying, that it's more than usual. So the interesting thing is we talk about stress, and stress has this really negative connotation, but in reality, no change ever happens without some level of stress and pressure. It's actually required for change at the level of the cell, at the level of the brain, at the level of the body, and at the level of function. If we don't actually have pressure to change, change doesn't happen. But there's this really fine line that exists where when we're on one side of it, the stress is a good stress. And when we're on the other side of it, it can actually become a toxic stress and hinder a lot of the things that we actually want to get done. And so this is where I think mindful practice really has a place. So let's dig in. So this is my favorite part to talk about. So forgive me while I nerd out just a little bit in talking about the brain. The brain is truly amazing, and its job really is to protect us at all costs. And so we have this reaction to stress that's important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens at the level of the brain and then give us some idea of maybe an anecdote that will help this to come to life for you. So when we have the perception that we are in danger, some type of stress is happening to us, we see it, we feel it, we smell it, we have this immediate protective reaction where this alarm is really rung for us. And what happens is all of that perception goes to a very primitive part of the brain called the limbic system. And that limbic system is awesome because it controls things like our metabolic rate. It controls our blood pressure, our respiratory rate, our heart rate. It controls all of the things that are going to be necessary for us if we need to take action, if we need to run away or we need to fight. And that's really important. What happens after that time, though, is while this amygdala, the center of the brain, is really on fire from perceiving stress, what isn't happening is the cortex part of our brain, the thinking and logical part, isn't online as quickly as that stress reaction is. So it takes a little while for us to really think about logically, am I in danger or am I not in danger? Is this something I need to react to or something I don't need to react to? So an example of that is if you've ever been really engrossed in your work, and I guess pre-COVID, somebody comes up and puts their hand on your shoulder and you jump, right? And you have this immediate stress reaction. That's that primitive part of your brain really reacting to saying there is danger. And then you'll notice after a little bit of time, a couple of seconds, that you recognize that this person isn't a danger. That logical part of your brain kicks online. And therefore, you're able to override this kind of stress center of your brain. The problem becomes is when our brain, it really likes repetition. And so what ends up happening is if we're exposed to stress over and over and over and over again, we get very used to being in that mode of just the primitive brain reacting and having this fight or flight reaction consistently. That becomes problematic for learning, for remembering, for projecting into the future. And that is, from a very simplistic standpoint, what PTSD actually looks like. So we have this big scare, right? And we have this reaction, and then hopefully we have a moment in time where our cortex can come online and we can actually react in the way that we choose to, rather than the way our primitive brain chooses to. So I want to talk a little bit specifically to this crowd about how stress is really different for people who report high technology usage, and also for people who report that they are women. And so there are very specific stressors in both of those realms. So I want to talk through those a little bit. So when we think about high-tech users, one of the things that is highly reported in the literature is that there's a great deal of sleep dysregulation. And I think that we're all familiar with that blue screens that are typically computer-based cause decreased melatonin. Melatonin is a neurotransmitter in your brain that helps you feel sleepy, helps you get to sleep, and to stay asleep. So when we have decreased melatonin, we have difficulty with those things. So we have more difficulty falling asleep, more difficulty staying asleep. And because of that, people who experience sleep dysregulation have poor resilience. They can't react well or kind of absorb blows that happen during their day, and they report higher levels of stress and anxiety. The other thing that becomes tricky for people who are really exposed a lot to tech is that there's a difficulty with work-life balance. More on that in a little bit, because they actually don't believe that exists. But we're constantly available, right? There's never a time when we're not available to other people, when we're not available to respond. And so that creates stressors for us. Also, I think that we're all familiar with some of the research that's coming out now with the stress that's involved with this kind of social media life, right? People never put their piles of dirty laundry or dirty dishes, or their hair is a mess, or they're in their pajamas at 3 o'clock in the afternoon working on whatever it is. That's not the social persona that they're projecting. And so we have these negative self-comparisons for people who are putting their best life on social media and feeling like we don't have that same life, yet we should. So people are reporting, because of that, a decreased sense of well-being. And then this is the part that is the hardest for me, if I'm going to be completely transparent. And that's that perceptual distraction, right? My phone, I'm trying to work on something, my phone goes off, I get pinged from Teams. There's a million things that are going on for me. And it's really hard for me to stay really, really focused. What we actually realize is that there's a neurologic reaction to being distracted all the time that we call kind of the use it or lose it. So because we're not using and practicing attention and memory and learning in this really distracted environment, we actually see those skills decrease for people. So really we need to kind of keep on top of those things. So it's something to think about. So in saying that, one of the ways that we try to manage doing lots of things at one time is multitasking. So my question to you is, how good are you at this? I have to say it's such a pleasure to be working with people who are technologically savvy. Sometimes when I use this poll, it takes a really long time to get people to respond. So thank you for being so quick and agile. So I'm seeing that most people are kind of in the middle here, that people are pretty good at multitasking. They perceive that they're pretty good at multitasking, and it helps you get more done. And I think that's probably the perception of most people, but let's see what the research says. So this is actually an fMRI, or a functional MRI. So what it is it's looking at activity of the brain while someone is doing something. And so this is a study out of Stanford about multitasking. And they asked people to do a couple of different things. The first thing they asked them to do was just to drive in a car, completely silent, just drive a very specific route. The second thing that they asked them to do was drive the exact same route, but this time to listen to sentences. And the sentences didn't really mean anything to the people. It was just that it was consistently the same sentences for every single driver. And here's what they found. In the situation where they were listening to sentences, brain activity actually decreased by 33%. And so what scientists are really thinking at this point is multitasking is not something we're actually good at, that it actually might overwhelm the brain and cause it to become less effective at any given task. So think about that for a minute, and we'll move to the next slide. So we have stress. Stress is always going to be there, and I'm never going to be the person that says, like, I really believe in mindfulness. However, mindfulness does not make stress not exist. It exists. And so we want to think about how good are we really as women at managing stress, because women actually, the research says, manage stress differently than men do. So women are actually more likely to report higher levels of stress than men. I like to think it's because we're much more in touch with who we are and what's going on with us. We're more likely to report that we have physical or emotional symptoms of stress. But when we think about managing it, only 33% of us report that we actually feel like we get enough sleep, that 36% of us actually report that we actually have healthy eating habits during times of stress. 29% of us report that we're actually effective in getting physically active, which we know is something that mitigates stress. And 35% of us report that we actually feel like we're doing a good job with managing stress. And those numbers don't feel okay. But here's something that makes it even harder. Is that when women report that they are stressed, what they report is the way that they manage that is to choose a sedentary activity, right? So we listen to music, we read, we watch TV. But what we're not choosing are the things that actually research says make a difference. So seeking counsel from a mental health professional or participating in exercise. So this is also, I think, so incredibly amazing in terms of being a woman. We actually handle stress in many different ways. Our reaction to our sense of wanting to manage our stress is really different. And so we talked about fight or flight, and that is a primitive reaction for sure. But what we actually see for women is a tendency not for fight or flight, but for tend and befriend under situations where they are high stress. So women tend to their offspring, to their families, to the people that they care about when they feel stress. And they also affiliate, like everyone was doing this morning, with members of their group. They create a sense of community. And so this was suggested as a way that women manage stress. But we actually see research that very much supports this idea as well, because when we look at what in general women really value, it's good relationships with family and friends, and then use activities that really create connectivity amongst them and their community. So I do think that's definitely worth talking about. So weird, seems off topic, but stay with me. What's your choice? The front or the back of a roller coaster? All right, so I love the women on this call. This is fantastic. And men too. So it looks like so many of you choose the front of the roller coaster. So I am talking to my people. So when we look at this picture, we see that the two people in the front of this roller coaster are having very different reactions to being in the front of the roller coaster. You see the young woman is really excited to be in the front of this roller coaster, and the child who is next to her is 100% certain this is not going to end well for him. They have the same amount of control over this situation. What's different for them is the perception of power that they have in this situation. And so that's what I want to talk about. So one of the ways that we can really change what our perception is, change our perception of power, change our perception of the way we, the way that we look at any given situation, is through mindfulness. And I think that people have heard a lot about mindfulness, and I think that that's great, but I just want to put us all on the same page about what it is that we're talking about, because it's a really simplistic idea. It's a really simplistic idea, but from my own personal experience, it's a really hard one to affect, right? Because what it requires is for you to take a moment and take a breath and to be very, very much in the present, and in a present that isn't tied to what just happened or what happened an hour ago or what's going to happen next or what's going to happen an hour from now, but just to be present right in this second and paying attention to what's going on. The other piece, and I find that this is really hard for women in general, is to not just be aware, but to not judge it, right? So there's no judgment in what it is that's going on at any given moment, at any given time. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Harvard Business Review, I will tell you that it is not something that I usually kind of delve into, because it is, while it's wonderful and has lots of great information in it, is a $22 magazine. But my husband reads it all of the time. And so I happened to pick one up on an airplane flight that we were on, obviously before COVID. And there was this article actually about mindfulness in it by Helen Langer. And what she found in her research, and this is what made me start to pay attention, is that people who practice in the business world, who report that they practice regularly mindfulness, they report that they remember more of what they just did. And don't we all need that? Not to start from the beginning again with all of the distractions, right? They report that they're more creative in their work, that they report that they're able to recognize and take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. I think this next one is important, that you like people better and people like you better when you practice mindfulness, and that you're less judgmental. And I would say that that probably links to people liking you better, right? So those are all things that I feel like I can definitely use in my life. And I'm hoping that you feel that way as well. So this is the simple part of it, right? So how do we use mindful practice, and really what is it? Well, what it really is, and I'll talk about the neurology and why it maps on so well to stress, is that you move from an emotional reaction to a situation. Remember that little boy that was in the front and absolutely freaked out about this roller coaster? We move from that emotional reaction to a much more objective one. What can we measure? What is logical? Then we take a moment to acknowledge it. So what is going on here? What is it that I'm experiencing? And then we give it a name. And it's as simple as, you know what, right now, I feel a lot of stress. And that's it. Not judging it. I don't have an opinion about how I feel. It's just logical and objective. So sounds really simple, but in practice, it is a real challenge to do. So I want to talk back about the brain, because that's my wheelhouse and definitely where I feel the most comfortable. So we're learning so much about the brain. It's actually, in my opinion, in the next 10 years, we're going to know way more about what the brain is capable of, because I don't feel like we really have a handle on it right now. And I'm sure that all of you, when you think back to any of the education that you've had kind of around the brain, you learned about the lobes and what they were responsible for, and the left hemisphere is responsible for something and the right hemisphere is responsible for something. And what we actually truly know is, as human beings, we like to compartmentalize like that. The brain doesn't really work like that. It's a whole bunch of networks that all rely on each other. But for the sake of simplicity in talking today, we're going to talk about the left and the right hemisphere as very separate entities. So I want you to think about your left hemisphere of your brain as the L, left side, linear, logical, right? That's the math side of our brain, the thing that is going to be able to tell us sequentially what is going to happen next in a very objective way. The right side of our brain is the feeling side of our brain, the emotional side of our brain. It's the gestalt. It's kind of the world as kind of a community part of our brain. So what happens when we lose our composure, and all of us have in some stressful situation, we lose our composure. And what happens when we look at the brain through MRI is actually we see all of our activity go to the right side of our brain. So we have all of this stuff going on in the right side of our brain where we have the emotional part lit up. We don't have a lot of activity in the left linear logical side of our brain. So what mindfulness actually does is it helps us to shift focus from the right side of our brain to the left side of our brain. When we lose our composure, what we see happening is that very center primal part of the brain that we were talking about earlier, that overrides our ability to really use our cortex and reason. And so when that happens, we feel increased anxiety, increased stress, increased fear when we have the right side of our brain really going and that center part of our brain really going in response to a perceived threat. So this is, proof positive that mindful practice can actually make a difference, because what happens is we look at the left side of the screen here, and this is a baseline fMRI. Remember, that's a functional MRI. We're looking at somebody doing something, right? So in the left side, we're actually having somebody just sit there and do nothing. Then there was a break where people practiced mindfulness over a period of time regularly. And then they came back in, and what they saw is when they were practicing mindful meditation in this case, there was actually significant increase in the left side working of their brain. So we were actually able to see a right to left shift with regular practice. So what they are perceiving is that this allows for somebody to experience empathy and emotional balance and intuition and flexible thinking. And don't we all need that in what it is that we do in our daily lives? So this slide I love, if I'm going to be honest, because it takes a whole bunch of the research from mindful practice and puts it together. And so just as kind of a caveat, in the United States, mindful practice really, the research in mindful practice really started in the medical field. It was a way that MDs were looking to decrease the amount of errors and increase patient satisfaction in patient outcomes in their practice. And so a lot of this literature is culled from there, but what we're seeing now is this is really reflected in the business world as well, that the same outcomes are happening for people in leadership in the business world. So what we see in general in the literature is that decreased errors in work for people who practice mindfulness regularly, decreased depression, anxiety, and experience of pain, burnout is decreased, increased resilience, increased focus, improved awareness. People who practice mindfulness actually report improved quality of life. They have a much more regulated emotional response and better coping strategies. So those are all true. We're seeing those kind of be the same across the board. So what can you do? The thing that I love about mindfulness is it doesn't look all the same. It's not just meditation. People find that they can practice mindfulness in a number of ways, and it doesn't take very long, right? So I'm sure that you all remember from your younger life, or maybe even now, that if you got upset about something, somebody would say, all right, you know what, take 3 deep breaths. What we actually know now from imaging studies is that actually makes a humongous difference, because it dampens that attention to your breath, actually dampens that fight or flight reaction that we might have, and it allows us to have more logical, linear thinking of the left side of the brain. So I'm going to tell you a little secret that I have, and if you ever see me in public doing this, then you'll know exactly what's happening. But one of my psychologist friends told me to do this, and I thought, oh, that's such a good idea. So we're all frequently in challenging situations where we're working with somebody or dealing with somebody where our stress is increased. And I actually just take the flat of my palm and put it right at the bottom of my diaphragm, so I can recognize how fast I am breathing, how deep I am breathing. And it's a physical cue for me to pay attention to my breath and to not escalate in terms of my stress. So it's a nice way to kind of pay attention. But you can pay attention to your breathing literally anywhere, and you don't need to do it for 10 minutes, right? You can do it for 1 minute, you can do it for 30 seconds, but any amount of time that you do it, we actually see a change in emotional reaction. So driving, walking, eating, exercise, talking on the phone, all of these times you can really tend to your mindful practice. But it's not just about breathing, and it's not just about meditation. Some people find that they can be really mindful and pay attention to any given moment and be in the present by keeping a journal, by having self-reflection. And actually, one of the big studies that was just out, it was about physicians, but who shared their experiences with other peers and said, hey, I just had a patient where this happened, or I just had a situation where this happened. And that reflection, that peer-to-peer reflection, actually had the same effect that mindfulness did, because they were reflecting and coming back to self. So I think that's really interesting. This last one I am not so keen on because I am not there yet. But Ellen Langer, the person who we were just talking about in the Harvard Business Review, she recommends thinking that your thoughts are transparent to other people, so they're visible by other people. And I am definitely not there yet, right? I don't want people knowing what I'm thinking all of the time. I think that could probably be dangerous. But I like the idea that our thoughts really need to be in line with our actions, and they need to be in the present, not the past or the future. And I really do appreciate that. But what I appreciate even more is that, you know, there isn't such a thing as work-life balance. There's never a balance. There's always one that's calling to us more than the other, and sometimes both at the same time. But she recommends really thinking about work-life integration, that at any given time, something's going to be calling us, and we need to make decisions about where we place our time because it's finite. And that stress isn't a function of events. Like, you're not experiencing stress because of something physical, but you're actually experiencing stress because of your perception of that event. So I like what she has to say there. So why is it hard? Why is this hard for us? Like, what is the difficulty with it? And so what we actually know is that we're wired for stress from an evolutionary standpoint, right? It was what kept us alive. So when we opened the front door and there was a lion standing there, we needed to be able to react with fight or flight. And so that's really important. But we can make choices now. Our brains have evolved and allow us to make choices. So we can choose to take a different perspective and ask ourselves, okay, stressful situation or something negative is going on. What's the positive that I can take away from this? What can I learn from this? We can take a moment to think, you know what? I have preconceived notions about this interaction or this situation. I think the roller coaster is going to be really scary, and so I want to sit in the back. But am I allowing those preconceived notions to color what I'm doing, the experience I'm having right this second? I think we've all had this where you get up in the morning and you go to pour your coffee and it spills, or you forget to put the cup underneath the Keurig, right? And then your kids are not getting ready on time, and they're not helping you to move forward in any way. And every interaction that you're having with every person is negative. And you start to think, is it a full moon? But then you step back and you think, what is the common denominator in all of these situations? And it's me. I'm the common denominator. And is it possible that whatever happened earlier in the morning is now coloring every single thing that I do and think during the day, because I didn't take time to think about, you know what, this really stinks. I'm experiencing stress. That didn't go well, and take a moment to reset and change my perception of what's going on. I also think that as women, it's really hard for the next one to be okay with not being sure, not being certain about something, that there are very few things in life that we can be 100% certain about. And so allowing ourselves the grace and space to take risks, be vulnerable, make mistakes, and being okay with that sometimes can really take some of that stress away. But I love this part. So perception is reality. There's this really interesting, a couple of interesting studies where they took a bunch of housekeepers and did some training where they told them, you know what you do is exercise. And they weighed them before and after that, and 100% of the housekeepers lost weight just by telling them your work is exercise. The other thing that they did was, instead of, when people were at the eye doctor, instead of asking them to read the Snellen chart from the top to the bottom and saying what's the lowest you can read, they asked people to read it from the bottom to the top. And an incredible percentage of people were actually able to read a much lower line than when they did it from the top to the bottom. So perception really does matter. It really does matter in function and outcome. So let's go ahead and try some mindful activities if you'll participate with me. This is the first time I've done it without seeing anyone, so bear with me. So what I need you to do is we're going to just take a moment to focus on our breath, because it's a great way to start a Wednesday. So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to move into your chair or wherever it is that's comfortable for you. Put your feet flat on the floor and allow the support of the chair to support your body. So push your bottom all the way against the back. Use the back to relax. Make sure that you're in full contact. Feet are in contact with the floor. You find some comfortable seated position. Put your hands on your table, your desk, your lap, whatever is comfortable for you. And you are very welcome to close your eyes or leave them slightly open. And all that I'm going to ask for you to do is settle in. Let's come to this moment right now. Let's slow down. See if you can make your bones heavy. Heavy in your lap, heavy in your chair, heavy on the floor. Start to become aware of your breath in your belly. Do you feel the slight expansion as you breathe in? Do you feel that slight stretching? Can you feel the recoil as you breathe out? Don't change your breathing. Just become aware of it. Stretching and relaxing. And stretching and relaxing. Stay with that for just a couple of more breaths. And it's normal and typical for your mind to wander away from that. Just gently bring it back. Now I want you to concentrate on your nose. Think about breathing in through our nose and out through our nose. In through our nose and out through our nose. Become very aware of how the air feels at the tip of your nose. Cool coming in, warm going out. Cool coming in, warm going out. Let's stay with that for a couple more breaths. And if your thoughts wander away from your breath, just gently bring them back. In and out. In and out. Now I'd like you to become aware of your body. With every breath that you take in, scan your body, and every breath you breathe out, see if there's a little more tension that you can let go. Some people will experience tension in their neck, upper shoulders, upper back. Low back, thighs, hands, face. See if you can let go just a little bit with every breath. Continue to try to focus on your breath. Focus remaining on your breath. Interfering thoughts or distractions come in, let them go. But the next 4 breaths are all yours. Go ahead and open your eyes and let's come back together. So that activity took 2 minutes. It doesn't need to take 2 minutes. It can take longer or shorter. But I just want to bring your awareness to your neurologic system right now. Do you feel a little less buzzy, right? Do you feel a little calmer and more focused? If so, maybe that's the kind of mindful practice that will help you. There are, if you go online, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas. There's single nostril breathing that people can do. There are actual, if you go onto YouTube, there are voiceovers that will help walk you through tons of mindful practice. So this is really out there a lot. It's very commonplace at this point. But if you find that that spoke to you, then I would say definitely try to work that into your day. The idea is certainly to do this when we experience stress, but hopefully over time with regular practice, we're not only doing this when we experience stress, but we're doing it before we experience stress. So we're starting to recognize, what are the antecedents? What are the things that come before? What are the things that make me stressed? And in trying to not get to the point where we feel stressed, but using mindful practice kind of as bouts throughout our day, kind of as we would with eating a meal. And speaking of eating of a meal, let's talk about how mindful practice can actually influence the way that we eat. There are a number of studies that have come out recently talking about, sorry, I need to click on this. There we go. Talking about mindful eating. And I think a lot of this makes sense. We live in a very rushed world. I think as women, we are pulled in many, many, many different directions all of the time, and we want to be excellent at everything that we do. And so sometimes that causes us to rush through things. We already heard that we don't do a very good job of paying attention to healthful eating, that we use eating as a way of coping with stress. And so this is something that the literature is really showing can have a significant effect on weight loss and well-being. And I think that that's a really important thing, because it's just a mindful practice. It's not a diet, right? That's not something that we can, that we change. It's really just our perception and the way we go about something. And so let's talk about the tenets of mindful eating, and you can see if this might fit into your life in some ways. So the first thing is slow down, right? We need to take a pause. So when it's time for us to eat, we're actually going to slow down and appreciate this is our time to eat. We are present in this time. And it doesn't matter what just happened. It doesn't matter what's going to happen, but we're just going to take mindful time to slow down. I think the next one is really interesting, that the suggestion is that you plate all of your food, regardless of whether it's something you just got at a fast food restaurant or what have you, that you plate your food so that you're perceiving that you're about to eat a meal. It's about perception, right? And it's about being present. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that the suggestion from mindful eating is that you only put on your plate what you think will leave you about 75% full, right? So we're not kind of putting everything on the plate. If we want more, if our body is hungry, we can go back and get more. That at least for the first few bites, that you really show up for those first few bites, that you experience your food. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like when you chew it? What are the sensations that you get while you're eating it? So at least for the first few bites, being really mindful about what is your perception and experience, and making sure that you continue that slow roll across your time with your food. The other thing that's really important is when you're done with that 3/4 of a plate, you need to go back and reassess and ask, if you're still hungry, what is still hungry? Is it your mind that's hungry? Because maybe going for a walk or taking some breaths will be helpful. Or is it your body that's hungry? And then certainly go back and get more food if that's what's happening. So this is the other piece that it's my one of my last slides, and I want to leave you with kind of thinking about how important sleep is and how bad we are at it. That there's very clear research on what makes for good and healthful sleeping. And even if we don't do everything that's on every list that I have here, I think it's really, really important that we think about, are there small things that we can change? We don't need to change everything. We don't need to be perfect, right? I was saying earlier that the year of 2020 is the year of giving grace. We're not going to be perfect at everything, and that is, it's okay. But are there small things that we can do that will improve the quality of life? Because if we're not good to and for ourselves, it's really hard to be good to and for other people. So sleep is a really good and relatively easy place to make some adjustments. And so dimming the lights about an hour before you go to sleep, we are very driven by light. We like to wake up to the light. We like to go to sleep to the light. And as we're thinking about kind of what's happening right now, and it's getting dark earlier, getting dark earlier and staying dark later into the morning, that is challenging. But we want to think about dimming the lights about an hour before sleeping. We sometimes will turn to alcohol as a way to help us to fall asleep, but actually the physiology of alcohol and the way that we metabolize alcohol actually interferes with sleep. So it makes it so that you have difficulty falling asleep, or it may help you to fall asleep, but it interferes with your ability to stay asleep and get good quality sleep. So that is definitely not a recommended thing. The next part's hard. And I was laughing as I was looking through this PowerPoint last night to make sure it said what I wanted. It was literally at 10 o'clock last night in bed, looking through my PowerPoint and thinking, hypocrite. But don't take work to bed, right? Don't take work to bed. Bed is for sleeping. And so no complex tasks about 2 or 3 hours before you plan on going to bed. So there's no complex thinking. And the other thing that's really important is to do what I like to refer to as a brain dump before you go to bed. So you're going to write all of your ideas down so that when and should you wake up in the middle of the night, you're not ruminating on those. You've actually had a chance to kind of put them down in writing so you can give them away and let them go until you return to them the next morning. The other thing is exercise is super important. I say that literally about everything, and it's absolutely true. And the thing that frustrates me, and it's true for me as well, that when I get really busy, and what the research shows is when people get busy, the first thing that they give up is exercise. And really, the truth is, it's the thing that matters probably the most. And so putting that at the top of your to-do list is incredibly important. I talk about all the time when I go to any of the physical therapy conferences, we have specialties, right? Like, so I'm a pediatric specialist, but there are neuro specialists, there are orthopedic specialists, so on and so forth. But if you walk down and listen to people's research, everybody's like, exercise helps, and exercise helps. It helps for everything. Motion is lotion, I like to say. So putting that back at the top of your list is really, really important. But knowing when not to be exercising is important as well, because what we find is exercise is invigorating. So doing it anytime that's not before 2 or 3 hours before bedtime can actually interfere with sleeping, which is a challenge. This next one is a challenge too, a sleeping schedule. Trying to maintain a regular schedule so that your brain and body know when they're supposed to be awake and asleep is incredibly important for good quality sleep. Really hard to do, but it's important for good quality sleep. If you can leave your devices out of your sleeping space, That is a really good idea. I think that we all know kind of the Pavlovian response to a ping on Teams or Outlook, where you just kind of turn your head and you know exactly what that sounds like. But if you can leave your devices out of your sleep space, you will find that your quality of sleep increases. Then interesting. I love a cool bedroom when I sleep, but what the research actually says is 65 degrees, sounds chilly, 65 degrees is actually optimal for sleeping. So if you can decrease the temperature, we're much better off. So this is a place for you to kind of reflect, take a moment of mindfulness. Is there something that you learned or thought about today that feels like an aha moment to you, like this connected with me, or I want to know more about this? Is there something that you can share? And we can certainly talk about it or not. But you are very welcome to use your devices to share here. Hopefully everyone is not asleep from the mindful practice piece. I love these. You all are brilliant. You didn't need me. I'm so happy to see so many of these things. Oh, I like the 60-degree person is right up my alley. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I do think that it's really hard. I want to really reiterate that I don't do all of those things. And a lot of times I don't do any of them. But I do think that when you have it kind of in your tool bag as a way to address stress, and you try to put yourself a little bit higher on the list every day, I think that you'll find that the results of that are really, really helpful. There's a lot of books out there about mindful eating too, if that's something that resonated with you. Great. I love it. I love it. I'm going to give about 10 more seconds before I move to the next slide. Thank you all for being so open and transparent and vulnerable. That is fantastic. I really appreciate that. So I am really delighted to be with you. It was very weird to be talking to myself in the computer. I've not done that before, so I hope that was okay for all of you. I am happy to continue to talk about the brain at any length. And when Heather asked me to speak and she said, "You have 45 minutes," and I thought, I don't know what I can say in 45 minutes. So hopefully everybody walked away with at least one thing that they can do that will help them to manage their stress better or to feel like they have an improved quality of life than I did my job here. So thank you. And I appreciate you having me.
Jen, that was fabulous. I mean, you could see from everybody's responses, I was thinking to myself, there are so many things that I took away from your talk. I just kept writing notes and I was taking my camera and I was taking pictures of your slides. So many. And when we did the exercise, which hopefully there was a lot of people in your first poll that were very overwhelmed. So hopefully that brought them down a notch, at least for today. That was only 2 minutes. So I really enjoyed it, right? We all get up early this morning. We actually had to, do our hair for this and so forth. So I couldn't believe it was only 2 minutes. I felt like 5 minutes. And when you said, all right, that was 2 minutes, I was like, oh, well, there's zero excuse for me not to practice mindfulness. So thank you so
I
much.
think when we take away the excuses, what's left, right?
Exactly. Yes. It's so wonderful. So we do have time for some Q&A. If people do have any questions, please put it in the Q&A box so it's easier for us to monitor. And I know that you all shared some wonderful insights from Jennifer today. But yeah, if you have any questions right now, put them in the Q&A box and Jen can answer them. And we'll give it a minute or so for people to type in if they have anything. If not, like I said, if Jen has time, we're leaving the room open until 9:30 for people to network. And Jen will be over at table 1 for as long as, I don't know if she's able, are you able to stay for a few more minutes, Jen?
Absolutely, I can stay for a few more minutes. I can probably stay. I can probably sneak out. I do have a meeting at 9, but we can probably go to like 9:15.
Okay, so, no problem. So Jen will be at table 1 till 9:15. If you have any other questions that we don't get to right now, please go over and see Jen. And there are some things in the general chat. So people are wondering, can we get the slides? So I did record this session. So I will check with the Tech Alliance on how, I think Josh can post it somewhere so people can have access to the recording. So stay tuned on how we can get you the recording, but it is recorded. So you can have that as well. And okay, so we do have some questions in the Q&A. So Jen, the first question was, I have a book on my shelf about raising mindful children, and admittedly, it's collecting dust. I will definitely read it after this. Do you have any quick tips for guiding our kids toward mindfulness?
I feel like, Julie, we somehow set this up and we did it, but this is actually, I love, oh, it's backwards for you all, isn't it? I'll read what it says. So this book is really, really fantastic for teaching children about mindfulness. It's not, you can see it's not very thick, but it's called Mindful Monkey, Happy Panda. And I actually use it with my students as an introduction to mindfulness. And this is really, it's a really nice book. It's really understandable. The pictures in it, you can see that there's not a lot of, there's a lot of picture and not a lot of words. I really, really love that book. And we are actually finding, the research is showing that we are able to practice mindfulness and be successful with children who are in preschool. So this actually is a technique that we can use. Clearly, it looks different than what we did, but the techniques and the ideas are the same. And when we think about, really the world, now you've hit on my pediatrics background, but really the world that we live in is very different today for our children, and the stressors are very real and very present. The experience of anxiety is very much increased for our children because safety is not always guaranteed. And so helping children early to develop coping strategies is super important. So every opportunity that we can give them for self-reflection, for giving them the space to say, I feel whatever, and there isn't a judgment that comes with that. And then developing coping strategies beyond that is incredibly important. It's important for us, but the earlier we can teach that, the easier it is. I mean, I learned to ski as an adult, and that still is not very pretty. But I know people who have learned to ski as children, and they're much more adept at kind of doing things because it was part of their lexicon from the very beginning. So I say early and often.
That couldn't have been, you just happen to have the book there for the question. Like, you would think we set that up. Like,
to show it. So I was really glad that it was right next to me.
Really simpatico. Well, thank you. That's wonderful. Okay, so I don't see any more Q&A right now, unless Felicia put something in the chat box. Okay, some other recommendations. Okay. So thank you so much, Jen. This was just fabulous.
My pleasure.
So many wonderful things. This was just so great. I really appreciate it. So in addition to Jen sticking around afterwards at table 1, Market Street Talent, who is our sponsor for today's breakfast, is at table 2. We also have a billboard for Market Street Talent. You can click on their link if you want to learn more about them. We have the link embedded on the billboard on the left-hand side of your screen once we go back into table mode. And again, this initiative, the TechWomen Power Breakfast, is just one initiative of part of the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. So check them out and all the other wonderful events that we have going on each month. And please be sure to, for those of you it's your first time joining, thank you so much for joining us. For our regulars, thank you again for joining. Tell your friends and tell your male counterparts we welcome This is the TechWomen Power Breakfast, but as you know, we welcome our male counterparts to join us as well, so tell them too. And next month we have Lexi Garcia. She's the Director of Strategic Projects at ARMI, which is the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute. So she'll be here next month, November 11th, I believe is the date. So stay tuned for that, put it in your calendars. And again, it's we're going to continue our virtual events through the end of the year. Hopefully, you know, the world will be right someday soon and we'll actually see each other face to face, but this is great. And your mindfulness practice, Jen, for the virtual ended up working out wonderful.
Oh, good.
If we were all in a room, we might have felt awkward, like closing your eyes and being around each other. So
it's
just
really weird to not have feedback.
Yeah, I know. It is. I understand that, but you know, I'm just here in my study by myself, so I was perfectly comfortable with my eyes closed and really being mindful in the moment. So I appreciate it. So we will be virtual through the end of the year. It's been my honor to represent the TechWomen Power Breakfast, and I thank my committee members for all the hard work that they do. And I'm going to close out, and I hopefully we hit our mission of coming together to inspire each other and be inspired. I know I certainly was. Jen, you were very inspiring today. And we're going to break down to tables. If you forget or don't know how to hop around, just double click from table to table, network like you're at an event in person, and have a fabulous day, everybody.